The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the Wild Hollow General Store, its wheels grinding against the dusty road. Isabel Grace Randall gripped her worn leather valise tighter as she peered through the window at the small frontier town that was supposed to be her new home. 6 months of letters had led her here, 6 months of careful penmanship and cautious hope, exchanged with a rancher named Edwin Clay, who claimed he sought a dependable, industrious wife. She had been honest in her letters, perhaps too honest. She'd written about her height, nearly 5 feet 9 inches in her stockings, about her years working alongside her late father on their failed homestead in Nebraska, about her calloused hands and her ability to break a horse as well as any man. Edwin had seemed charmed by it all, writing back that he admired a woman who wasn't afraid of hard work. The driver yanked open the door. "Wild Hollow, miss, end of the line." Isabel gathered her traveling cloak around her shoulders and stepped down, her boots hitting the packed earth with a solid thud. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel curious eyes from the storefront windows tracking her movement. She'd grown accustomed to stares. A woman traveling alone always drew attention, but these felt different, sharper, knowing. "Miss Randall." She turned to find a man approaching, and her heart sank. Edwin Clay looked nothing like she'd imagined. His letters had painted a picture of a robust rancher, someone who worked the land with his own hands. Instead, she saw a soft-bellied man in a too-tight vest, his face flushed not from sun, but from what appeared to be an early afternoon visit to the saloon. "Mr. Clay." She extended her hand, a gesture that seemed to startle him. He stared at it for a moment before giving it a limp shake. His eyes traveled up and down her frame, and his expression shifted from anticipation to something like dismay. "You're taller than I expected." "I mentioned my height in my third letter," she said evenly. "Yes, but I thought, well, ladies sometimes exaggerate to seem more." He waved his hand vaguely. "But you're actually tall, yes." A small crowd had begun to gather. Isabel recognized the signs, the way the women whispered behind their hands, the way the men tried not to look too interested while hanging on every word. She'd seen it before in other towns, other failures. Edwin circled her slowly, like a buyer inspecting livestock. "And these hands?" He grabbed her wrist, turning her palm upward to reveal the calluses and scars from years of ranch work. "Good Lord, these aren't a lady's hands." She pulled away. "I never claimed they were. I told you about my work experience. You said you valued—" "I valued the idea of a helpmate," he interrupted, his voice rising. "A woman who could manage a household, perhaps help with lighter chores, not someone who looks like she could wrestle a bull to the ground." A snicker came from somewhere in the gathering crowd. Heat flooded Isabel's cheeks, but she kept her chin high. "Then it seems we've both been mistaken about what we were seeking." "Mistaken?" Edwin's face reddened further. "I've spent good money on your passage. I've told everyone I was bringing home a bride, and this is what arrives. You're too what?" Her voice came out steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "Too strong, too capable, too much of what you claim to want in your letters." "Too mannish." The words exploded from him. "Look at you, that jawline, those shoulders. Christ almighty, you're built like a ranch hand, not a wife. What kind of woman grows to such proportions? What kind of woman works until her hands are like leather?" The crowd had grown larger now. Some of the women looked sympathetic, but most seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. A few of the men were nodding along with Edwin's assessment. "The kind who survives," Isabel said quietly. "The kind who doesn't have the luxury of soft hands and delicate constitutions." Edwin laughed, an ugly sound. "Well, you can survive somewhere else. I won't be made a fool of. I ordered a wife, not a, he seemed to struggle for the right insult. Not a female oddity." He grabbed her valise from where the stage driver had set it and thrust it at her. "There's a boarding house on 3rd Street. Or maybe you can find work at one of the ranches. Lord knows you're built for it." "Edwin, please," She hated the pleading note that crept into her voice. "I've come all this way. At least give us a chance to—" "No." He backed away from her as if she were contagious. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but you're not what I wanted. Not at all." The crowd began to disperse. The show, apparently over. A few lingered, whispering and pointing. Isabel stood alone in the street, her valise heavy in her hands, her traveling cloak suddenly too warm despite the approaching evening. The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and heavy, promising a storm. Of course. She looked up at the darkening sky and almost laughed at the timing. Even the weather seemed determined to make her humiliation complete. "Ma'am!" She turned to find a young boy, perhaps 12 or 13, standing near her. He gestured toward the wooden awning of the general store. "Storm's coming in fast. You'd best get under cover." She followed him to the relative shelter of the storefront, setting her valise down on the planked walkway. The rain began in earnest then, turning the dusty street into a river of mud. She watched it fall, wondering what she would do now. The boarding house Edwin had mentioned would cost money she didn't have. She'd spent everything on the journey here, believing she was coming to a new life, a real home. That was poorly done. The voice was deep, quiet. She looked up to find a man leaning against the post beside her. She hadn't heard him approach. He was tall, taller than her, which was rare, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that marked him as a working man. His face was weathered but not old, perhaps 35 to her 27 years. "I beg your pardon." He nodded toward where Edwin had disappeared. "Clay, that was poorly done. Man invites a woman halfway across the country. He ought to at least give her supper before he sends her packing." "Yes, well, apparently I'm not what was advertised." The stranger's eyes, a peculiar gray-green, like sage leaves, studied her with uncomfortable intensity. "Seems to me you were exactly what was advertised. Clay just didn't have the sense to know what he was asking for." Before she could respond, he pushed off from the post and picked up her valise as if it weighed nothing. "Daniel McCrae," he said by way of introduction. "I've got a wagon. Ranch is about 2 miles north." What?" He looked at her with those unsettling eyes. "Storm's going to get worse before it gets better. Town's boarding house is full up with cattle buyers in for the auction. Unless you fancy sleeping in the livery stable with the horses, you'd best come along." "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "But you didn't know Clay either, and you came 1,000 miles to marry him. Least I'm only asking you to ride 2 miles. She should refuse. Every bit of sense she had told her that going off with a strange man was foolish. But the rain was coming down harder now, and she could see faces peering out from windows, eager to witness what the rejected bride would do next. "I'm not looking for another arrangement," she said carefully. "If you're thinking, I'm thinking you need a dry place to sleep and a meal that isn't hardtack and beans." He shifted her valise to his other hand. "Got a room above the stable you can use. Lock on the inside if that makes you feel safer. You can figure out your next move come morning." Thunder rumbled overhead. The rain had become a sheet of water, obscuring the buildings across the street. Isabel looked at this Daniel McCrae, searching his face for signs of deception or worse. But his expression was patient, almost indifferent, as if it mattered little to him what she decided. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged. "Maybe I don't like seeing someone get thrown away like damaged goods. Maybe I need help around the ranch and figure a woman who can work like a man might be useful. Maybe I'm just contrary enough to want what Clay was fool enough to refuse." He started walking toward a wagon parked at the corner. "You coming or not?" She stood for a moment longer, rain now blowing in under the awning, dampening her skirts. Then she squared her shoulders and followed him. What choice did she have? Really? The wagon was sturdy but plain, built for work rather than comfort. He stowed her valise in the back and offered her a hand up. His grip was firm, calloused like hers, and he didn't flinch at the strength of her grasp. As they pulled away from town, she glanced back to see faces still pressed against windows. watching her leave with the stranger. Tomorrow the gossip would be all over Wild Hollow how Edwin Clay's mail-order bride had been too masculine for his tastes, how she'd left town with that peculiar McCrae fellow who lived alone out on the North Range. "I'm not what most men want," she said suddenly, surprising herself. Daniel kept his eyes on the muddy road ahead. "Most men are fools," he said simply. "Including me, probably, but at least I know it." The ranch, when they finally reached it through the driving rain, was modest but well kept. The stable was solid, the house small but sturdy. He pulled the wagon into the barn and helped her down. "Room's up those stairs," he said, pointing to a ladder leading to a loft. "It's clean and dry. There's a pitcher of water and some blankets. I'll bring supper in an hour or so." Mr. McCrae." "Daniel," he corrected. "And before you start thanking me or warning me or whatever words you're trying to find, don't. You need help. I've got room. Simple as that. Nothing simple out here except survival. And you strike me as someone who knows how to do that." He turned and walked out into the rain, leaving her standing in the barn with her valise and a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. She climbed the ladder and found the room exactly as described, sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and yes, a sturdy lock on the inside of the door. She sat on the bed, still in her damp traveling clothes, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day. She'd traveled so far, hoped for so much, only to be rejected before she'd even had a chance to prove herself. And now she was here, in a stranger's barn, with no clear path forward. But she was dry, she was safe, and tomorrow she would figure out what came next. She always had before. As promised, an hour later came a knock on her door. When she opened it, she found a tray with beef stew, fresh bread, and coffee waiting on the landing. Daniel was already heading back down the ladder. "Thank you," she called after him. He paused, looking up at her. "Like I said, simple as survival. Get some rest. Miss Randall. Morning'll come soon enough." And with that, he was gone, leaving her to her meal and her thoughts. The rain hammered on the roof, but the room was warm and dry. She ate slowly, savoring the first hot meal she'd had in days. Tomorrow she would have to make decisions, face the reality of her situation. But tonight, she was no longer standing in the street being judged and found wanting. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, the morning sun slanted through the cracks in the barn walls, painting golden stripes across the rough wooden floor. Isabel had been awake since before dawn, old habits dying hard. She'd washed her face in the basin, braided her hair tightly, and put on her plainest work dress, the one that had shocked Edwin the least, though apparently not enough. From her window in the loft, she could see Daniel McCrae already at work, leading a string of horses from the corral to the pasture. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of practice, never rushed but never wasting a gesture. The horses followed him willingly, no rope needed. She descended the ladder, her boots hitting the barn floor with a soft thud. Daniel glanced over but said nothing, simply nodded toward the house, taking this as an invitation. She made her way across the yard, noting the well-maintained fences, the orderly arrangement of tools, the absence of the chaos that had marked her father's failed attempts at ranching. The house was small but clean, with a kitchen that showed signs of bachelor living, functional but sparse. A coffee pot sat on the stove, still warm, and a loaf of bread waited on the table with a crock of butter. "Help yourself," Daniel said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him approach. "I don't stand on ceremony." "I should pay you for—" "No need." He poured himself coffee. "The movement's automatic. You'll work it off if you stay. If you don't, consider it road charity." "I don't take charity." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "Figured as much. That's why I said you'll work it off." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Isabel asked, "What kind of work? Can you handle horses?" "Since I was 8. Mentak. Better than most. Cook. She hesitated. Adequately. Nothing fancy. Fancy's got no place here anyway. He set down his cup. I run about 30 head, mostly quarter horses. Break them, train them, sell them to ranchers and the army. It's honest work, but hard. Been doing it alone since my partner died last winter. Could use help if you're inclined to stay. For how long? He shrugged. Long as it suits both of us. You need time to figure your next move. I need help with the horses. Fair trade. It was more than fair, and they both knew it. What will people say, a woman staying here? People will say what they say regardless. Your reputation was decided the moment Clay rejected you in front of half the town. His tone was matter of fact, not cruel. Least here you'll have work and wages. That's more than most can say. He was right. In a frontier town, a woman alone had few options, and her public humiliation had likely closed doors that might otherwise have been open. All right, she said, but I sleep in the barn. Suit yourself. Gets cold at night, though. House has a spare room if you change your mind. The barn is fine. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Come on, then. Let's see what you can do. The first test was a bay mare with a suspicious disposition and a tendency to bite. Daniel led Isabel to the corral where the horse stood, ears pinned back, warning off anyone who might approach. She's green broke but fighting it, he explained. Previous owner tried to rush her. Now she trusts no one. Isabel studied the mare, noting the tension in her muscles, the white showing around her eyes. Fear, not meanness. She'd seen it before. What's her name? Doesn't have one. Like I said, she's green. Every horse deserves a name. Isabel climbed through the fence rails, moving slowly but confidently. The mare's ears swiveled, tracking her movement. How about sage for your eyes? My eyes? She glanced back at him. They're the color of sage leaves. He said nothing, but she caught that ghost smile again before turning back to the horse. She stood in the center of the corral, not approaching, not retreating, simply being present. The mare snorted, pawed the ground, but Isabel remained still. Minutes passed. 5, 10, finally. The mare's ears came forward slightly. A good sign. Isabel took one step backward. The mare, curious now, took one step forward. They continued this dance, Isabel retreating, the mare advancing until the horse stood just feet away. That's a girl, Isabel murmured, still not reaching out. Nobody's going to rush you here. She turned her back on the mare and walked away. Behind her, she heard hoofbeats. The mare was following. By the time she reached the fence, the horse was walking beside her, close enough to touch but not being touched. Well, I'll be damned, Daniel said quietly. She just needs time and patience, Isabel said, climbing back through the rails. Most creatures do when they've been mishandled. Speaking from experience. She met his eyes. Aren't we all? Over the next days, a routine developed. Isabel rose with the sun, tended the horses Daniel assigned to her, mended bridles and saddles in the afternoon, and retired to her loft room as darkness fell. Daniel was a steady but unobtrusive presence, offering guidance when needed but mostly leaving her to work independently. He was unlike any man she'd known. He didn't hover or criticize unnecessarily. He didn't comment on her appearance or manner except as it related to the work. When she lifted heavy sacks of grain, he didn't rush to help unless she asked. When she worked late into the evening on a particularly stubborn piece of harness, he simply left a lantern and disappeared. You're an odd one, Daniel McCrae, she said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple. How so? You haven't once told me how I should be different, how I should be smaller or softer or more, whatever it is men think women should be. He sipped his coffee, considering. Seems to me a person is what they are. Trying to make them different is like trying to make a quarter horse into a thoroughbred. Might could do it with enough force, but you'd break something essential in the process. Is that why you live out here alone, to avoid people trying to change you? Maybe. He was quiet for a long moment. Or maybe I just prefer honest company. Horses don't lie. They don't pretend. They are what they are. And people are complicated. He glanced at her. Though some are more honest than others. She felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away. I should check on Sage. She's fine. Saw you working with her this afternoon. You've got good hands. So I've been told, usually not as a compliment. Their loss. The simplicity of his acceptance was almost overwhelming. She'd spent so long defending herself, explaining herself, trying to make herself fit into spaces too small for her body and spirit. Here, she just was. A week passed, then 2. The work was hard but satisfying. The horses responded to her, even the difficult ones. She found herself looking forward to each day, to the challenges and small victories. Daniel paid her fairly, and she saved every penny, though for what she wasn't sure anymore. The trip to town for supplies was unavoidable. She'd delayed as long as possible, but they needed grain, and she needed a few personal items. Daniel offered to go alone, but she refused to hide. I'll not be run out of town by gossip, she said, chin high. Never thought you would be. Wild Hollow was busy with the usual Saturday commerce. Isabel felt eyes on her the moment they drove down Main Street. Whispers followed in their wake. She kept her gaze forward, her spine straight. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor's wife, served them with the lips pursed so tight they nearly disappeared. Heard you were staying out at the McCrae place, she said, making it sound like an accusation. I'm working there. Yes, working. The word dripped with implication. Daniel stepped forward. Mrs. Henderson. We'll need 50 pounds of oats, 20 of grain, and whatever Miss Randall requires for her personal needs. His tone was mild, but something in his presence made Mrs. Henderson step back. She filled their order without further comment, though her disapproval radiated from every movement. Outside, loading supplies, they encountered Edwin Clay coming out of the saloon. His step faltered when he saw them, his face flushing. Isabel, he said, then seemed unsure how to continue. Mr. Clay. Edwin's eyes darted between her and Daniel. I heard you were... That is, people are saying... People say many things, Daniel interjected calmly. Most of it worth less than the breath used to speak it. Edwin's flush deepened. Now see here, McCrae, I'm trying to be civilized about this. The woman came here under false pretenses. Did she? Daniel's voice remained level, but Isabel saw his hands tighten on the reins. Seems to me she was exactly what she claimed to be. You just wanted something that doesn't exist except in dime novels and your imagination. A man has a right to expect honesty. She gave you that. You threw it back in her face in front of half the town. Daniel clicked to the horses. Good day, Clay. They drove away, leaving Edwin standing in the street. Isabel found her hands were trembling slightly. You didn't have to defend me. Wasn't defending you. Was stating facts. Besides, he glanced at her. Seemed like you could handle Clay yourself if needed. Just figured you shouldn't have to. That evening, as she climbed to her loft room, Daniel called after her. For what it's worth, I think Clay's a fool. She paused on the ladder. Most would disagree. Most people are fools too. He turned away. Sleep well, Isabel. It was the first time he'd used her given name. She lay awake thinking about the sound of it in his quiet voice, the way he'd stood between her and the town's judgment without making her feel weak for needing it. The next morning, she found a small package outside her door. Inside was a new work shirt, sturdy and well-made, in a size that would actually fit her tall frame. No note accompanied it, but she knew. She wore it that day as she worked with Sage, who now came to her whistle and accepted the saddle without protest. Daniel watched from across the corral as she swung up onto the mare's back, sitting tall and confident. "She's ready," Isabel called. "Gentle as a lamb now. You did good work with her. She just needed someone to see her as she was, not as they thought she should be." Their eyes met across the dusty corral, and understanding passed between them. "Yes," he said simply. "I expect that's true." That night, she didn't immediately retreat to the barn. Instead, she sat with Daniel on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. They didn't speak much, but the silence was comfortable, companionable. "I should probably think about moving on soon," she said eventually. "I've imposed long enough. Have you? People will talk more the longer I stay." "Let them." He leaned back in his chair. "Unless you're eager to leave." Was she, the thought of going back out into a world that had no place for her? Of trying again to force herself into a mold that would never fit? "No," she admitted. "I'm not eager to leave." "Then stay until you are. Winter's coming. I could use the help through the cold months." "All right," she said softly. "Through winter, then." But even as she said it, she wondered if spring would find her any more ready to leave this quiet refuge where she could be herself, where her strength was valued rather than scorned, where a man looked at her and saw not what she should be, but what she was. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. Daniel rose and headed inside, pausing at the door. "That room in the house is still available. Gets mighty cold in that barn come December." "I'll think about it." He nodded and disappeared inside. Isabel remained on the porch, watching the stars and thinking about roots, about belonging, about the strange comfort of being seen clearly by gray-green eyes that asked for nothing but honesty in return. The first freeze came in early October, turning the grass brittle and painting frost on the windows. Isabel woke shivering in her loft room, her breath visible in the cold air. She'd piled every available blanket on the narrow bed, but the chill crept through the thin walls regardless. By the time she climbed down to begin the morning chores, her fingers were stiff with cold. Daniel was already in the main barn, breaking ice on the water troughs. He glanced at her, taking in her pale face and trembling hands. "Cold night." "I've had warmer." She grabbed a pitchfork, determined to work the chill away. He said nothing more, but she caught him looking at her throughout the morning with that quiet, assessing gaze. By noon, when they broke for the midday meal, he'd made his decision. "There's a storm coming," he said, gesturing to the darkening western sky. "Could be a bad one. Temperatures dropping fast." "I'll manage." "No." The word was quiet, but firm. "You won't. Not in that loft. Not in what's coming." She set down her coffee cup carefully. "Daniel, this isn't about propriety or what people think. This is about you not freezing to death in my barn because we're both too stubborn to be sensible." He stood, pacing to the window. "That spare room has a proper stove. You'll sleep there until spring. People will talk more than they already do. Let them." He turned back to her. "Your reputation can't feed you or keep you warm. Their good opinion won't matter much if you're frozen solid come morning." The first drops of sleet hit the windows. Soon it would be a full storm, the kind that could trap the unprepared and bury the foolish. She thought of her cold loft, of the thin walls and inadequate blankets. "Just until the storm passes," she conceded. "Until spring," he countered. "I won't have you moving back and forth like a traveling salesman. Either you trust me enough to sleep under my roof, or you don't. But I won't want you suffer for the sake of appearances." Trust, such a simple word for such a complicated thing. She studied his face, searching for any sign of ulterior motives, found nothing but genuine concern and that steady, patient presence she'd come to rely on. "All right, until spring." They moved her few possessions that afternoon, racing against the incoming storm. The spare room was small but warm, with a proper bed, a dresser, and most importantly, a small iron stove already crackling with heat. It was more comfort than she'd known in months. "Thank you," she said as Daniel set her valise by the dresser. He paused at the door. "Supper's at 6. We'll eat together now that you're in the house. Seems foolish to cook separately." The domesticity of it, sharing meals, sharing space, sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. "I'll help with the cooking, if you like." That first evening set a pattern that would carry them through the long winter months. They worked side by side during the day, caring for the horses, mending tack, preparing for the harsh weather ahead. Evenings were spent by the main fireplace, Daniel reading or working on accounts while Isabel sewed or wrote in her journal. They talked more as the nights grew longer. She learned he'd come west from Ohio after the war, seeking space and silence after too much noise and death. He'd built the ranch slowly, board by board, post by post, creating something solid in a world that had shown him how quickly things could be destroyed. "Why horses?" she asked one evening as snow piled against the windows. "They're honest," he said simply. "A horse won't lie to you, won't pretend to be something it's not. After the war, after all the politics and posturing and men dying for other men's ideas." I wanted something real. She understood that need for authenticity, for relationships uncomplicated by society's expectations. "Is that why you never married, to avoid the pretense?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "Partly. Also never found someone who wanted the life I'd built. Most women want town living, social calls, church socials. Can't blame them for it." "But not all women?" "No," he agreed, his eyes meeting hers across the firelit room. "Not all." The storm that had driven her inside was only the first of many. Winter settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, transforming the landscape into something beautiful and deadly. They worked together to keep the horses fed and watered, breaking ice, hauling hay, checking for signs of illness or injury. One particularly fierce blizzard trapped them inside for 3 days. The wind howled like a living thing, driving snow against the windows until they were completely obscured. They rationed firewood, melted snow for water, and played countless hands of cards by lamplight. "You're cheating," Isabel accused on the second night, watching him lay down another winning hand. "Proving it would require you to be better at cards," he replied with that ghost smile she'd grown to treasure. She threw her cards at him, laughing. He laughed too, a rich sound she heard too rarely. For a moment, the small house felt like the whole world, warm and safe while nature raged outside. On the third morning, she woke to silence. The storm had passed. She dressed quickly and found Daniel already outside, surveying the damage. Drifts reached almost to the roof of the barn in places. Several fence posts had snapped under the weight of snow and wind. "We'll have work ahead of us," he said as she joined him. "We'll manage." He looked at her, something soft in his expression. "Yes, we will." They worked together to dig out, to repair, to restore order. By evening, exhausted and cold, they sat before the fire with bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. Isabel's muscles ached, but it was the good ache of hard work accomplished. "You did well today," Daniel said quietly. "Not many could have kept up." "I told you I wasn't afraid of work." "No, you're not afraid of much, are you?" She considered this. "I'm afraid of plenty. Being useless, being unwanted, being—" She paused, searching for words. "Being made small by someone else's idea of what I should be. That why you answered Clay's advertisement looking for somewhere to be yourself?" "I thought I was looking for a home." She stared into the fire. "Turns out I was looking in the wrong place." "Maybe not wrong, just roundabout." Their eyes met and held. The fire crackled. Outside, wind whispered across the fresh snow. The moment stretched between them, full of possibilities and unspoken truths. Then Sage whinnied from the barn, breaking the spell. Daniel stood. "I should check on her. That youngest colt has been pestering her all day."
"I'll come with you."
They bundled into coats and scarves, wading through the snow to the barn. The horses were calm, Sage merely expressing her opinion about her young admirer. They stayed anyway, checking each animal, adding fresh straw to the stalls. "Isabel," Daniel said suddenly, his back to her as he adjusted a blanket on one of the older mares. "I need to say something." Her heart stuttered. "All right." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the lantern light. "You sleeping in my house? It changes things. Changes how people see you, how they see us. I want you to know. To understand." He seemed to struggle for words, unusual for a man typically so precise. "If you stay through winter, really stay, sharing my roof and my meals and my life, you need to know what that means." "What does it mean?" He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes despite her height. "It means you'd be choosing to be seen as mine, even if we haven't." He exhaled roughly. "I'm not a man for half measures. If you sleep under my roof all winter, come spring, this town will consider you my woman, whether we've done anything to earn that label or not." "And if I am?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Your woman. I mean, would you—" His hand came up to cup her cheek, work-roughened thumb gentle against her skin. "Would I want that, yes? Have I thought about it every night since you've been sleeping just down the hall? God, yes, but I won't assume, won't take advantage. You came here looking for something else, and I won't be another man trying to force you into a box you don't fit." "You're not forcing anything." Her voice came out whispered. "You're the only person who's never tried to make me smaller." "Because you're perfect as you are." The words were fierce, certain. "Let the world try to contain you. I'd rather watch you run free." She kissed him, simple as that, rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, her hands fisting in his coat. He froze for a heartbeat, then his arms came around her, pulling her against him with a soft groan. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Isabel, I know what it means." She interrupted. "Staying through winter, sharing your home, being seen as yours. I know, and I'm choosing it." He pulled back to search her face. "You're sure?" "I've been sure since that first night you offered me shelter without asking anything in return. Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment you picked up my valise and didn't flinch at its weight or mine." He kissed her again, deeper this time, with a hunger that made her knees weak. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were dark with promise. "There's something else I should tell you," he said, voice rough. "That spare room you've been sleeping in come morning, you might find it's not available anymore." "Oh, why's that?" "Because you'll be in mine." His hands tightened on her waist. "You sleep in my bed. You wake up as my woman. I told you I don't do halfway." The echo of Edwin's different expectations, of every man who'd wanted her to be less than she was, should have frightened her. Instead, she felt only a bone-deep certainty that this was right. This man, this place, this choice. "Then I guess I'd better move my things," she said. He laughed, sudden and bright. "Tomorrow, tonight, let's take this slow, court proper, even if it's backwards." They walked back to the house hand in hand, snow crunching beneath their boots. Inside, they sat closer than before, her head on his shoulder as they watched the fire burn low. He pressed kisses to her hair, her temple, the corner of her mouth, each one a promise. "I should warn you," she said sleepily as the clock neared midnight. "I hog blanket something terrible." "I'll buy more blankets." "And I wake early. Sometimes I sing while I work. I like music. I'll never be delicate or proper or—" "Isabel." He tilted her chin up. "I don't want delicate. I want you. The woman who can gentle a scared horse and haul hay until her hands bleed and face down a whole town's judgment without flinching. That's who I want in my bed, my home, my life. You might regret those words come morning when I've stolen all the covers. Never. He sealed the promise with another kiss. Not for a single moment. Later, alone in the spare room for the last time, Isabel smiled into the darkness. She'd come west looking for a husband and a home. She'd found both, just not in the way she'd expected. Tomorrow, she would move her few possessions down the hall. Tomorrow, she would wake as Daniel McCrae's woman in truth, not just in the town's gossip. But tonight, she simply held the certainty close she was chosen, not despite who she was, but because of it. And that made all the difference in the world. The morning after the storm dawned crystal clear, with the kind of sharp brightness that only comes after blizzards. Isabel moved her belongings from the spare room to Daniel's with a mixture of nervousness and determination. His room was larger, dominated by a sturdy bed he'd built himself and a window that looked out over the horse pastures. Second thoughts, he asked from the doorway, watching her arrange her few possessions. No. She smoothed the quilt, handmade by his mother years ago. Just thinking how strange life's paths can be. 3 months ago, I was preparing to marry a stranger. Now you're sharing a bed with a different one. She turned to face him. You're not a stranger anymore. No, he agreed, crossing to her. I suppose I'm not. Their first night together was tender and careful, full of whispered promises and gentle exploration. Daniel was patient, attentive, treating her not like something fragile but something precious. When she woke in his arms the next morning, winter sunlight streaming across the bed, she felt something settle deep in her bones. Home. This was home. The change in their relationship shifted the rhythm of their days subtly but significantly. They moved around each other with new awareness, casual touches that sent warmth through her even in the cold. Daniel would rest his hand on her lower back as he passed. She would smooth his collar before they went to town. Small intimacies that spoke of belonging. Word spread quickly, as they'd known it would. The first test came 2 weeks later at the Saturday market. Isabel had debated staying home, but Daniel wouldn't hear of it. We've done nothing to be ashamed of, he said firmly. Let them see us, let them know. The reactions varied. Some women turned away with pinched faces and loud sniffs of disapproval. Others watched with curiosity or even envy. The men mostly ignored her, though a few tipped their hats to Daniel with knowing smirks that made her teeth clench. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson could barely contain herself. Living in sin, she muttered, loud enough to be heard 3 aisles over. What kind of example is that setting? The honest kind, Daniel replied calmly, not looking up from the supplies list. We'll need 2 pounds of coffee, Mrs. Henderson. The good stuff, not that chicory blend you've been trying to pass off. The woman sputtered, but filled the order. As they loaded their purchases, Reverend Morrison approached, his face grave. Mr. McCrae, Miss Randall, a word. Reverend, Daniel acknowledged, continuing to arrange sacks in the wagon. I'm concerned about the situation. Perhaps if you came to services tomorrow, we could discuss making things proper. Appreciate the concern, Reverend, but we'll handle our business our own way. Daniel helped Isabel onto the wagon seat. Good day. As they drove away, Isabel caught sight of Edwin Clay standing outside the saloon. Their eyes met for a moment. She expected anger or righteousness, but saw only a flicker of something that might have been regret before he turned away. That went better than expected, she said once they'd cleared town. Did it? Daniel's jaw was tight. I should have handled it better. Should have what defended my honor proclaimed our intentions to the whole town. She touched his arm. I don't need defending. Daniel, we made our choice. Let them choke on their disapproval. He covered her hand with his. You're right. I don't like them looking at you that way. Like you're something less because of me.
I'm something more because of you,
she corrected. And anyone who can't see that is blind. That night, as they lay entwined in their bed, Daniel traced patterns on her bare shoulder. Would it make things easier? He asked quietly.
Getting married proper. I mean, we could ride to the county seat, find a justice of the peace.
She was quiet for a long moment.
Is that what you want?
I want you comfortable, safe, respected. That's not what I asked. He sighed, pulling her closer. I've never much cared for ceremonies and papers saying what's already true, but if it would help. It wouldn't. She turned to face him. Not really. They'd just find something else to whisper about. The rushed wedding, the lack of proper courtship. There's no winning with people determined to disapprove. Then what do? We live our lives. We work our ranch. We let them see that we're happy, successful, complete without their approval. She kissed him softly.
And maybe someday, when we're ready, when it's for us and not them, we'll stand before witnesses and say words. But not now. Not like this.
He studied her face in the moonlight.
You're sure?
I've never been more sure of anything. The next weeks brought new challenges. A fence mysteriously damaged, requiring hours of repair in the bitter cold. A merchant in town suddenly unable to fill their grain order. Small harassments that spoke of the town's collective displeasure. The worst came on a clear February morning. Isabel went to feed the horses and found crude words painted on the barn door. She stood staring at them, fury and hurt warring in her chest. Don't look at it. Daniel appeared beside her, his face carved from stone. Go inside. I'll handle this.
No.
She grabbed a bucket and brush.
We'll handle it together?
They scrubbed in silence, the red paint stubborn against the weathered wood. When they finished, ghost letters remained, but faint enough to ignore. I'm sorry, Daniel said finally.
This is because of me, because I couldn't leave you be.
Stop! She turned on him fiercely.
This is because small minds can't stand to see something they don't understand. This is because I don't fit their narrow idea of womanhood, and you don't care that I don't. That threatens them. It shouldn't be your fight.
It's been my fight all my life. The only difference now is I'm not fighting alone. That afternoon, she found Daniel in the workshop, reinforcing the barn door with iron bands.
That won't stop paint, she pointed out.
No, but it'll stop anything worse. His movements were controlled, but she could see the anger beneath. I've been patient with this town, kept to myself, asked little, but if they think they can threaten what's mine.
Daniel!
She caught his hands, stilling their violent work.
Don't let them make you into something you're not. That's what they want, to prove we're as low as they think.
He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair.
How are you so calm?
Because I have everything I need right here. They can't touch that, no matter how much paint they splash.
He held her tighter. I love you. The words were muffled against her neck, but she heard them clear. Should have said it sooner. Love you, Isabel. Have since.
Hell, probably since you stood in that corral and named my horse after my eyes.
I love you too,
she whispered back, paint and gossip and all. The next morning brought an unexpected ally, Mary Sullivan. The doctor's wife appeared at their door with a basket of preserves and a determined expression.
Mrs. Sullivan.
Isabel blinked in surprise.
Miss Randall, Mr. McCrae.
The woman's chin lifted.
I've come to say that not everyone in town shares certain narrow opinions.
My husband and I believe people should be judged by their actions, not their circumstances.
That's kind of you,
Isabel managed.
It's sensible.
Mary thrust the basket forward.
Also, I wondered if you might help me with a horse. My daughter's pony has developed some behavioral issues, and I hear you have a way with difficult animals.
It was an olive branch, tentatively offered. Isabel accepted it gladly, I'd be happy to look at her. Wonderful. Perhaps Thursday, and do bring Mr. McCrae. My husband enjoys intelligent conversation, which is rare in these parts. After she left, Daniel shook his head in wonderment. Did that just happen? I think we might have made a friend. Friends, he corrected. Plural. If Mary Sullivan approves of something, half the town's women will follow eventually. She's got that way about her. He was right. Over the following weeks, the tide began to shift. Not dramatically, but in small ways. A nod here, a greeting there. The Reverend's wife asking advice about her garden. The blacksmith filling their order without sneers or delays. Not everyone thawed. Of course, Mrs. Henderson remained icily disapproving, and Edwin Clay crossed streets to avoid them. But it was bearable, especially when weighed against the life they were building together. One evening in early March, as they sat by the fire planning the spring breeding schedule, Isabel felt a deep contentment wash over her. This was what she dreamed of in all those letters to Edwin. Not the respectability of being a proper wife, but this partnership, this sharing of work and dreams and quiet evenings. What are you thinking? Daniel asked, looking up from his ledgers. That I'm happy. She smiled at his startled expression. Truly, deeply happy. Despite everything, or maybe because of it. Is that strange? No. He set aside his work and drew her onto his lap. Not strange at all. I was just thinking the same thing. Even with the town drama, the town will come around or it won't. Either way, we'll survive it. He kissed her temple. We've survived worse. Both of us. This is just weather. Speaking of weather, she said, gesturing to the window where new snow was beginning to fall. Looks like another storm coming in. Let it come. His arms tightened around her. We've got walls, a roof, warmth, each other. What more do we need? Nothing, she agreed, settling against him. Absolutely nothing. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, the fire crackled cheerfully, and two people who'd found their way to each other against all odds sat in perfect contentment, planning a future that belonged to no one but themselves. In a few weeks, the last of the winter storms would pass. Spring would come with its demands of foaling season and fence repairs and all the endless work of ranch life. The town would continue its slow journey toward acceptance or not. Life would bring its share of challenges and joys. But tonight, in this moment, they were exactly where they belonged together, whole and unafraid of tomorrow. The Saturday market buzzed with spring activity. Farmers brought early vegetables. Ranchers discussed breeding plans, and women compared fabric for new dresses. Isabel and Daniel moved through the crowd with practiced ease, their presence no longer causing the stir it once had, though whispers still followed in their wake. They'd just finished loading supplies when Edwin Clay appeared, blocking their path to the wagon. His appearance had deteriorated over the winter months, clothes less neat, face bearing the telltale flush of too much drink. Well, if it isn't the happy couple, he slurred, loud enough to draw attention. Edwin, Daniel's voice held warning. Step aside. Or what? Edwin swayed slightly. You'll defend her honor a bit late for that, isn't it? Isabel placed a hand on Daniel's arm, feeling the tension coiled there. Let's go around him. Yes, go around, Edwin mocked. Like everyone goes around the truth about what you are, proud of yourself. Isabel living in sin with the first man who'd have you, the only man who saw my worth, she corrected calmly. Unlike someone who ordered a wife like catalog goods and returned her for not matching the picture in his head. Edwin's face darkened. You were supposed to be smaller, weaker, more grateful for your attention. She stepped forward, using her height advantage. I was supposed to be many things. Edwin, lucky for me, Daniel prefers what I am. What you are is a... Daniel moved so fast Edwin didn't see it coming. Not violence, but a simple sidestep that put him between Edwin and Isabel, his presence suddenly seeming to fill twice the space. Choose your next words very carefully. Clay. The crowd had grown, forming a loose circle around them. Isabel saw Mary Sullivan watching with concern, Reverend Morrison with disapproval, and others with barely concealed excitement at the prospect of drama. Edwin must have seen something in Daniel's eyes that cut through his drunk bravado. He stepped back, but couldn't resist one last shot. The whole town knows what she is, what you both are, shameless and happy, Isabel interrupted, moving to stand beside Daniel rather than behind him. We're happy. Edwin, that's what bothers you most, isn't it? That I found with him what I never could have had with you. You found a bed to warm, Edwin spat. I found a partner, she corrected. Someone who sees me as an equal, not a disappointment. Someone who values my strength instead of resenting it. If that makes me shameless in your eyes, so be it. Daniel took her hand, lacing their fingers together. We done here, Clay, because we've got a ranch to run. Edwin looked around at the crowd, perhaps hoping for support, finding mostly averted eyes and uncomfortable expressions. His shoulders sagged. You'll get what's coming to you, he muttered. Both of you. Maybe, Daniel agreed. But it won't be from you. They walked to their wagon with heads high, the crowd parting before them. As Daniel helped her up to the seat, Isabel heard Mary Sullivan's clear voice cutting through the murmurs. Well, I thought she handled that with remarkable dignity. They rode in silence until they'd cleared town. Then Daniel exhaled heavily. I'm sorry about that. For what you didn't do anything. Exactly. I should have what hit him, given the town more reason to think poorly of us. She shook her head. You did exactly right. You were there if I needed you, but you let me fight my own battle. I felt like I was about to crawl out of my skin when he started saying, but you didn't. You trusted me to handle it. She squeezed his hand. Do you know how rare that is? How many men would have either fought for me or told me to be quiet and let them handle it? He glanced at her. You're not angry. Oh, I'm angry, but not at you. Never at you. That night, she found him standing by their bedroom window, staring out at the moonlit pastures. Can't sleep. Thinking. He didn't turn as she wrapped her arms around him from behind. About what Clay said, what they all think. Does it matter what they think? It matters that you have to hear it, that you have to defend yourself. Us, constantly. He covered her hands with his. You could have had a respectable marriage. Maybe not with Clay, but somewhere, with someone. Instead, you're here, being called. Things I won't repeat. Daniel McCrae, you turn around and look at me. He did, and she saw the guilt in his eyes, the worry. She cupped his face in her hands. I could have had a respectable marriage to a man who'd spend our lives trying to make me smaller. I could have had social acceptance at the price of my soul. Instead, I have you. I have a partner who sees me, values me, loves me as I am. Do you think I'd trade that for all the respectability in the world? But, no. She kissed him firmly. No buts, no regrets. No looking back. We chose each other. Remember, I'd choose you again tomorrow and every day after. He pulled her against him, holding tight. How did I get so lucky? Not luck, she murmured against his chest. Just two people smart enough to recognize what they'd found. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Isabel was working with a yearling when she saw a familiar figure approaching on horseback. Her sister Charlotte, whom she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Charlotte. She barely recognized the elegant woman who dismounted with practiced grace. What are you doing here? I might ask you the same. Charlotte's eyes swept over the ranch, lingering on Isabel's work clothes and sun-browned skin. Father's old friend, Mr. Pearson, wrote that he'd seen you. Said you were, well, living in sin, Isabel suggested dryly. Charlotte's mouth tightened.
Living with a man who's not your husband, yes.
And you've come to save me.
I've come to see for myself what's become of my sister.
Charlotte moved closer, lowering her voice.
Isabel, it's not too late. Harold and I could help you get established somewhere else. Somewhere no one knows.
I don't want to be somewhere else. You can't mean that. The scandal
exists mainly in the minds of people with nothing better to do.
Isabel set down the brush she'd been using.
Charlotte, I appreciate your concern, but I'm happy here.
Happy? Charlotte's voice rose.
You're notorious. People talk about you like you're some sort of fallen woman.
Isabel smiled wryly.
Let them. I know what I am. And what's that?
Loved, valued,
free to be myself.
She gestured around the ranch.
I work with horses. Charlotte, I wear trousers when it suits me. I speak my mind. I share a bed with a man who thinks I'm perfect exactly as I am. Can you say the same?
Charlotte flushed.
Harold is a good husband.
I'm sure he is. But does he see you, really see you, or does he see what you've learned to show him? Before Charlotte could answer, Daniel appeared from the barn. He took in the scene the elegant visitor. Isabel's defensive posture and approached slowly.
Company.
My sister, Charlotte. Charlotte, this is Daniel McCrae. Daniel nodded politely. Ma'am, you're welcome to stay for dinner if you'd like.
Charlotte studied him with obvious curiosity. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't this quiet, self-contained man who looked at her sister like she hung the moon. Thank you, but I should get back to town. Harold is waiting at the hotel. You're staying in town?
Isabel couldn't hide her hurt.
Not here. I thought it best, given circumstances.
Charlotte fidgeted with her riding gloves.
But perhaps we could talk more tomorrow if you'd come to the hotel for tea.
We'll see.
After Charlotte left, Isabel stood staring at the dust cloud from her departure. Daniel waited, patient as always. She's ashamed of me, she said finally. She's afraid for you. There's a difference.
Is there? He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Come on, let's finish with the horses. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Daniel brought up the visit again.
Will you go for tea? I don't know. Part of me wants to, but... She sighed. It'll just be an hour of her trying to convince me I've ruined my life. Have you... She looked at him in surprise. You know I haven't. I know, but maybe she needs to hear it, really hear it. He set aside the potato he'd been peeling. Family's important. Isabel, don't throw it away just because it's complicated. Speaking from experience, speaking from regret. His voice went quiet. I let pride keep me from reconciling with my brother before he died. Don't make my mistakes. The next afternoon found Isabel sitting across from Charlotte in the hotel dining room, feeling out of place among the delicate china and hushed conversations. She'd worn her best dress, the one she'd made for church socials, but still felt underdressed compared to Charlotte's traveling outfit. You look well, Charlotte said carefully. Healthy, strong. Ranch life agrees with me. Apparently. Charlotte stirred her tea with unnecessary precision. Isabel, I need to ask, does he treat you well, this Daniel? Better than well. But without marriage. Marriage is just words and paper. Charlotte, what we have is deeper than that. Words and paper that protect women, that give them rights, security, that make them property. Isabel leaned forward. Do you remember Father's friend? Mr. Garrett. His wife, she was married all proper, with words and paper and witnesses. Didn't stop him from drinking away their money and raising his hand to her when the mood struck. Charlotte flinched. Not all marriages. No, not all. But marriage itself doesn't guarantee kindness or respect or love. Those come from the person, not the ceremony. And if something happens to him,
You'll have no claim, no protection. I'll have what I've always had myself. My skills, my strength. Isabel softened her tone. Charlotte, I understand your concerns, but I'm not some naive girl being taken advantage of. I'm a grown woman who made a choice. To live in scandal. To live in truth. She reached across the table, covering Charlotte's hand. I know this isn't the life you'd choose, but it's the life that chose me, and I'm grateful for it. Charlotte turned her hand to squeeze Isabel's. I just want you to be happy and safe. I am both, more than I've ever been. They parted with tentative plans for Charlotte to write, to perhaps visit again under better circumstances. As Isabel rode home, she felt lighter somehow. Not all bridges had been rebuilt, but neither had they been burned. She found Daniel in the corral with Sage and her new foal, born just a week before. He looked up at her approach, reading her face with the skill of long practice. Go well. Better than expected. She climbed through the fence to join him. She still thinks I'm ruining my life, but at least she's willing to keep talking to me while I do it. He chuckled. That's something. Daniel. She watched the foal wobble around its mother. Do you ever wish we'd done things traditionally courted proper? Married in church? All of it? Do you? I asked first. He considered, one hand absently stroking Sage's neck. Sometimes I wish it for you, so you wouldn't have to defend us. But for myself, no, this feels right. What we have. True in a way that has nothing to do with ceremonies. That minister who comes through every few months, the circuit preacher, he'll be here next week. I know. We could ask him, make it official. Daniel looked at her carefully. Is that what you want? I want. She paused, searching for words. I want Charlotte to visit without shame. I want to walk through town without whispers. I want people to see us as we are, not as they imagine us to be. Will a ceremony change that? Maybe, maybe not. She met his eyes. But I think I want to anyway, not for them, but for us, to stand up in front of whatever witnesses will come and say, yes, I choose this man. Yes, I claim this life. Yes, I am exactly where I want to be. He pulled her close, kissing her temple. Then we'll do it, next week, with whoever will stand witness. And if no one comes? Then we'll drag in the horses. Sage can be your maid of honor. She laughed, the sound echoing across the pastures. I love you, Daniel McCrae. And I love you, Isabel Randall, soon to be Isabel McCrae, if you'll have my name. I'll have everything of yours, she promised. Name, life, future, all of it. The foal chose that moment to attempt a jump, landing in an ungainly heap that sent both its parents stepping forward in concern. Isabel and Daniel laughed together, and in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, ceremony or scandal, acceptance or continued whispers, they would face it as they faced everything together, honest and unafraid. The morning of the fire dawned clear and cold, with frost painting the fence rails silver. Isabel woke early, as was her habit, and slipped from the warmth of Daniel's arms to start the morning chores. She pulled on her work clothes quietly, not wanting to wake him after he'd been up late with a colicky horse. The smell hit her as soon as she stepped outside smoke, but not the pleasant wood smoke from their chimney. This was acrid. Wrong. Her eyes swept the property and landed on a thin column of black rising from the far corner of the barn. Fire! She ran back to the house, yanking the door open. Daniel, fire in the barn! He was up and moving before she'd finished speaking, pulling on boots and coat in one fluid motion. They ran together, both thinking of the horses, the tack, the hay stores that could turn the whole structure into an inferno. The fire was small still, confined to a corner where they stored old grain sacks. Daniel attacked it with a horse blanket while Isabel formed a bucket brigade from the water trough. Working together with desperate efficiency, they managed to smother the flames before they could spread to the hayloft. When the last ember was doused, they stood panting in the smoky air, surveying the damage. Black char marks climbed the wall, and several sacks were ruined, but the structure remained sound. "This wasn't an accident," Daniel said grimly, pointing to the remains of what looked like an oil-soaked rag. "Someone set this—" Isabel's stomach turned. Harsh words and social shunning were one thing, but this— the horses could have died. We could have lost everything. That was likely the idea. His jaw was tight with controlled fury. "Go check the animals. I'll look around. See if our visitor left any other surprises." She found the horses restless but unharmed, though Sage was pacing her stall, upset by the smoke. As Isabel soothed her, she noticed something white tucked into the stall door. A piece of paper, folded once. The message was brief and ugly. "Harlots burn in hell, this is just the beginning." Her hands shook as she read it, not from fear but from rage. How dare they? How dare anyone threaten innocent animals to make some twisted moral point? "Isabel," Daniel appeared at her shoulder. She wordlessly handed him the note. His face went very still as he read it, the kind of stillness that preceded storms. "I'll ride to town," he said. "Talk to the sheriff." "No." She caught his arm. "That's what they want. To see us frightened, running for help. Sheriff Watson won't do anything anyway. You know he won't." "Then what do you suggest?" "We clean up. We repair. We go about our business." She met his eyes. "And we watch. Whoever did this will expect fear. When they don't get it, they'll try again. And we'll be ready." They spent the morning clearing the damage and reinforcing the barn. Daniel installed new locks and hinges, stronger than before. They moved the hay to a different section, away from outside walls. Small precautions that felt both necessary and infuriating. The afternoon brought another blow. Isabel had walked to her small sewing room, planning to finish the dress she'd been making for the church social. She'd been determined to attend, to show the town that she wouldn't be driven into hiding. The dress lay across her sewing table, or what remained of it. Someone had taken shears to the fabric, reducing months of careful work to ribbons. Pinned to the ruins was another note: "Whores don't belong in church." This time, the tears came. Not from hurt, but from sheer frustration. The dress had been her statement, her way of saying she belonged despite their judgment. The soft blue fabric, carefully saved for the hours of hand-stitching by lamplight, all destroyed by someone's petty hatred. Daniel found her there, standing over the ruined dress with tears streaming down her face. He didn't speak, just wrapped his arms around her from behind and held on. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "Tired of fighting for the right to simply exist." "I know." His voice was rough. "This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Don't!" She turned in his arms. "Don't you dare take responsibility for other people's cruelty. This is on them, not you." "You were just starting to be accepted. Mary Sullivan, the doctor's wife, speaking to you. And that threatens them. Don't you see?" She pulled back to look at him. "As long as I was completely shunned, they could pretend I was suffering for my sins. But seeing me happy, seeing good people accept me, that challenges everything they believe about how the world should work." He touched her face gently. "What do you want to do?" She looked at the destroyed dress, then squared her shoulders. "I want to go to that social. I want to walk in there with my head high and dare them to say something to my face. You don't have a dress. Then I'll make another one." She moved to the fabric scraps, gathering them up. "I have a week. I'll use what I can salvage, buy new fabric for the rest. It won't be what I planned, but it'll be mine." "Isabel." "No, they don't get to win this easily." She met his eyes, fierce determination replacing tears. "I'll need to go to town tomorrow. For fabric. We'll go together." "Daniel, you don't have to—" "Together," he repeated firmly. "No more splitting up. If someone's bold enough to come onto our property, set fires, destroy your things, then we stick together." She nodded, seeing the wisdom in it even as she hated the necessity. Together. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. Isabel dozed fitfully, waking often to check that he was still there.
"Come to bed,"
she urged near dawn.
"You need rest."
"I need you safe more than I need rest."
"And I need you healthy and thinking clearly more than I need a guard dog."
She tugged at his hand.
"Please, an hour at least."
He allowed her to pull him to bed, but she could feel the tension humming through him. "Talk to me," she said. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking about how I've lived here 8 years without trouble, kept to myself, bothered no one, and they left me alone. Then you come along and suddenly you're visible," she finished. "Suddenly, you're part of the community, whether they like it or not, and that makes you a target. Makes you a target."
"Makes us a target."
She propped herself on an elbow to see his face.
"Do you regret it taking me in that first night?"
"Never." The word came fast and fierce. "Not for a second. I want to protect you, and I don't know how to fight enemies who sneak around in darkness."
"The same way we fight everything else, by enduring, by refusing to break."
She kissed him softly.
"They want us afraid, isolated, turning on each other. We don't give them that satisfaction."
The trip to town the next day was tense. Daniel wore his gun, something he rarely did, and kept Isabel close as they moved through their errands. The general store was nearly empty when they entered, for which she was grateful. Mrs. Henderson's disapproval was palpable as she cut fabric with sharp, angry movements. "Heard you had some trouble out at your place," she said, not quite managing to hide her satisfaction.
"News travels fast,"
Isabel replied evenly.
"Maybe it's a sign. Maybe the Lord is trying to tell you something about your choices."
"Maybe whoever set that fire should worry about what the Lord thinks of attempted murder and destruction of property," Daniel said coldly. "Last I checked, those were sins too." Mrs. Henderson's mouth snapped shut. She finished the transaction in silence, practically throwing their change at them. Outside, they nearly collided with Mary Sullivan, who took one look at their faces and steered them toward the doctor's office. "Come, you look like you need friendly faces and strong tea." In the Sullivans' private parlor, Isabel found herself telling Mary about the fire, the dress, the escalating harassment. Mary listened with growing outrage.
"Cowards,"
she declared when Isabel finished.
"Sneaking around in the dark like thieves. And over what? Because you dare to be happy without their approval."
"Some people can't stand to see others flourish outside the boundaries they've set." "Doctor," Sullivan said from the doorway, "especially when it calls their own choices into question." "What do you mean?" Isabel asked. "I mean that your contentment with Daniel, your obvious partnership and success, makes certain people question whether their own proper marriages are as superior as they've been taught." He accepted a cup of tea from his wife. "Nothing threatens the self-righteous more than proof that there's more than one way to live well, regardless of philosophy," Mary said briskly.
"Something must be done. You can't live under siege."
"We're managing," Daniel said.
"You're surviving.
That's not the same thing." Mary tapped her fingers thoughtfully. "The church social is in 6 days. You're planning to attend?"
"I am,"
Isabel confirmed. "Good. I'll make sure you're expected, and you'll sit with us." She held up a hand as Isabel started to protest. "No arguments. It's time the good people of this town remembered what Christian charity actually means." As they drove home, wagon loaded with fabric and supplies, Isabel felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. She means well, but her support might make things worse. Or it might make things better. Mary Sullivan has influence. She can't protect us from people willing to burn barns. "No," Daniel agreed grimly. "But she can make it harder for them to pretend they're doing God's work." That evening, Isabel spread out the salvaged fabric pieces alongside the new material. The dress would be different than planned, a patchwork of old and new. much like her life. She began cutting and piecing, finding a strange satisfaction in creating something beautiful from destruction. Daniel worked nearby, reinforcing doors and windows. They moved around each other in companionable silence, each focused on their own form of rebuilding. "It'll be beautiful," he said, watching her pin pieces together. "It'll be unique," she corrected. "Like everything else about our life. That's what makes it beautiful." She smiled at him over her work. Smooth talker. Just honest. A noise outside made them both freeze. Daniel moved silently to the window, rifle in hand. Long moments passed before he relaxed. Just deer. They're getting bold, coming so close to the house. But they both knew it wasn't deer they were worried about. The rest of the evening passed quietly, but the tension remained, a constant undercurrent to their domestic peace. As she worked on the dress over the following days, Isabel thought about patterns, how pieces that seemed ruined could be incorporated into something new, how destruction could become creation with enough patience and skill. It felt like a metaphor for her life, for their relationship, for the way they were building something worthwhile despite others' attempts to tear it down. "You're going to be the most beautiful woman there," Daniel said the night before the social, watching her put final stitches in the hem. "I'll be the most stubborn woman there," she corrected. "That's what matters." That too. He pulled her onto his lap, careful of the dress. "Are you sure about this? We could stay home, avoid the confrontation." "And let them think they've won," she shook her head. "No. We go. We hold our heads high, and we show them that their hatred hasn't broken us. Together. Always together." The next morning dawned bright and clear. As Isabel dressed in her salvage dress, a patchwork of blue that somehow looked intentional. Artistic, even she felt a calm settle over her. Whatever happened at the social, she would face it as she'd faced everything else honestly, bravely, and with Daniel by her side. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready," she confirmed. And they stepped out into the morning light, prepared to face whatever judgment awaited them. The church social was held in the town hall, its windows glowing warmly in the spring evening. Music drifted through the open doors, a fiddle and piano playing a familiar waltz. Isabel paused at the bottom of the steps, her hand tightening on Daniel's arm. "Second thoughts?" he asked quietly. "No, just taking a breath." He covered her hand with his. "We don't have to do this." "Yes, we do." She straightened her spine, the patchwork dress moving with her. "I refuse to let them make me a prisoner in my own life." They climbed the steps together. At the doorway, conversation stuttered and died. Isabel felt the weight of dozens of eyes, the mixture of shock, disapproval, and curiosity. She kept her gaze forward, chin high. Mary Sullivan appeared as if summoned, her smile warm and welcoming. "Isabel, Daniel, how wonderful! Come, I've saved seats." She led them through the crowd with the confidence of a woman who knew her social position was unassailable. People parted before her, some reluctantly, others with visible relief at having the decision made for them. "Your dress is lovely," Mary said, loud enough to carry. "Such creative use of fabric. You must tell me about the technique." Isabel recognized the lifeline and took it gratefully. "It's called crazy quilting. I adapted it from a pattern my grandmother used." They reached a table where Dr. Sullivan stood to greet them, along with the banker Thomas Morrison and his wife. Safe harbor, at least for the moment. "McCrae." "Doctor." Sullivan shook Daniel's hand firmly. "Good to see you. Been meaning to ask your opinion on that new breeding stock from Denver." And just like that, they were folded into normal conversation. Isabel slowly relaxed, though she remained aware of the stares and whispers. Daniel stayed close, his presence solid and reassuring. The evening progressed without major incident. A few people pointedly turned their backs, and Mrs. Henderson made a show of gathering her skirts when she passed, but others nodded politely or even offered tentative smiles. The circuit preacher, there for tomorrow's service and their planned wedding, greeted them warmly. "Miss Randall, Mr. McCrae, I look forward to tomorrow's ceremony." "As do we, Reverend," Daniel replied. "I trust you've found witnesses." "We have," Mary Sullivan interjected. "My husband and I would be honored to stand with them." The Reverend beamed. "Excellent. Love should always be witnessed by friends." The words carried, causing another ripple of whispers. Tomorrow's wedding was no secret, but having it confirmed so publicly, with respectable witnesses, clearly unsettled some. "Shall we dance?" Daniel asked suddenly, standing and offering Isabel his hand. She blinked up at him. Dancing would put them at the center of attention, exposed to every eye in the room. It was a bold move, almost defiant. "Yes," she said, placing her hand in his. "Let's dance." The floor was moderately crowded with other couples. As they took their position, Isabel was aware of people stopping to watch. Daniel's hand was steady on her waist. His eyes locked on hers. "Ignore them," he murmured. "Just you and me?" The fiddles struck up a new tune, slower, sweeter. They began to move, and Isabel discovered that Daniel danced as he did everything else with quiet competence and surprising grace. He led without dominating, matched her longer stride without making her feel awkward. "Where did you learn to dance so well?" she asked. "My mother insisted. Said a man who couldn't dance was only half civilized." His lips quirked. "Haven't had much call for it in recent years." "You should have. You're quite good." "So are you." They turned and swayed, finding their rhythm. Isabel became aware that other couples were giving them space, creating a subtle circle around them. At first she thought it was avoidance, but then she caught expressions of wonder, even admiration. She realized what they were seeing: a tall woman and a taller man moving together in perfect harmony, neither trying to make the other smaller. Her patchwork dress flowed with each turn, catching the lamplight. Daniel's rare smile transformed his weathered face. They looked, she suddenly understood, like what they were, two people deeply in love. "Everyone's staring," she whispered. "Let them," he spun her gently. "Maybe they'll learn something." When the music ended, there was a moment of silence. Then someone began clapping Dr. Sullivan, followed by his wife, then others. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to matter. They returned to their table amid a different quality of whispers. Isabel caught fragments, actually quite graceful. Never seen McCrae smile like that. Maybe we misjudged. "That was beautifully done," Mary said quietly. "Both of you." The rest of the evening passed more easily. A few brave souls even approached to make conversation. Young Mrs. Baker asked about horse training for her son. The blacksmith's wife complimented Isabel's dress with apparent sincerity. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Then Edwin Clay arrived. He was drunk again, or still, swaying in the doorway with unfocused eyes. His gaze found Isabel and Daniel, and his face darkened. He pushed through the crowd with unsteady determination. Well, he slurred, stopping before their table. The happy couple, dancing like you own the place. "Edwin, Doctor," Sullivan said warningly. "This isn't the time." "When is the time? Doc, when she's got her hooks in another poor fool." He laughed bitterly. "Though I guess McCrae knows what he's getting. Probably likes his women mannish." Daniel started to rise, but Isabel placed a hand on his arm. "Don't! He's not worth it." "Listen to her. McCrae," Edwin sneered. "She wears the pants. After all, must be convenient, not having to pretend she's a real woman." The hall had gone quiet, everyone watching. Isabel stood slowly, using her full height. Edwin actually stepped back. "You're right, Edwin," she said calmly. "I'm not the woman you wanted. I'm not delicate or helpless or grateful for scraps of attention. I'm strong and capable, and I speak my mind. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? I'm not scared of you, he protested, but his voice wavered. Yes, you are. You're scared of any woman who doesn't need you to feel complete, who doesn't shrink herself to make you feel bigger. She stepped closer, and he retreated another step. But here's what you don't understand. That's not Daniel's weakness. It's his strength. He doesn't need me small to feel like a man. She's right. The quiet voice came from behind Edwin. Everyone turned to see Margaret Clay, Edwin's sister, stepping forward. She was a mouse of a woman, usually silent at social gatherings. Margaret, don't, Edwin started. No, Edwin, I've stayed quiet too long. She looked at Isabel with something like envy. You are what I could never be. Strong, free, honest about who you are. And my brother hates you for it because it shows him what he is, a small man who needs others smaller to feel big. You don't know what you're saying, Edwin protested. I know exactly what I'm saying. Margaret's voice gained strength. I know about the letters you wrote after she arrived, the lies you told. I know about the fire. The hall erupted. You knew. Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. You knew he set that fire. I suspected, found lamp oil on his clothes, saw him sneaking back before dawn. Margaret lifted her chin. I should have spoken sooner. I was afraid. Margaret, you stupid! Edwin lunged toward his sister, but Daniel was faster, catching him by the collar. I think you've done enough damage, Daniel said, his tone conversational despite the iron grip he had on Edwin. Sheriff Watson, I believe you're needed. The sheriff, who'd been trying to remain invisible near the punch bowl, reluctantly approached. Now, McCrae, let's not make trouble. The trouble's already made. Doctor, Sullivan interjected. We just heard confession to arson. That's a hanging offense in this county. Edwin's face went white. You can't prove anything. My sister's confused. I'm not confused, Margaret said firmly, and I'm willing to testify to what I know. The sheriff had no choice. As he led Edwin away, the hall buzzed with shocked conversation. Isabel sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. Are you all right? Daniel asked, crouching beside her. I think so. I didn't expect that. None of us did, Mary said, Margaret Clay speaking up like that. Will wonders never cease? She was brave, Isabel said. It couldn't have been easy, going against her own brother. You inspired her. Thomas Morrison said, your courage in facing him down. Sometimes people need to see someone else be brave before they can find their own courage. The social continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The vindication of their suspicions about the fire, Margaret's unexpected defense, the grace they'd shown in the face of Edwin's vitriol, all of it had shifted something in the town's perception. As they prepared to leave, Reverend Morrison approached. I'm looking forward to tomorrow even more now, he said warmly. It seems the Lord works in mysterious ways, bringing truth to light just when it's needed. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. Isabel breathed deeply, feeling like she'd been holding her breath all evening. You were magnificent, Daniel said as they climbed into their wagon. The way you faced him down, spoke your truth without flinching. I had you beside me. That made me brave. No, he took her hand. You were brave all on your own. I just had the privilege of witnessing it. They drove home in comfortable silence, the stars bright overhead. Tomorrow they would marry, with friends as witnesses and at least some of the town's blessing. It wasn't the acceptance she'd once thought she wanted, but something better, respect earned through courage and authenticity. Do you think Edwin really set the fire? She asked as they prepared for bed. Margaret seemed certain, and it fits the timing, his escalating anger, the personal nature of the threats. Daniel's jaw tightened. If he's convicted, it's prison at minimum. I don't want that on my conscience. It's not on yours. He made his choices. He pulled her close. All you did was refuse to be diminished. If that drove him to violence, that's his failing, not yours. She nestled against him, thinking about the evening, the dance, the confrontation, Margaret's unexpected courage. Things will be different now. Yes, not perfect, but different. Better, maybe. Definitely better. We have friends, real ones. We have respect, or at least the beginning of it. And tomorrow you become my wife. He kissed her softly. If you still want that. More than ever, she assured him. Though I have to say, I already feel like your wife. Tomorrow just makes it official for everyone else. For everyone else, he agreed. For us, it's just another day of choosing each other. They lay together in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and changes. But tonight they had this peace, love, and the quiet triumph of staying true to themselves. Daniel, she said sleepily. Thank you for dancing with me, for standing by me, for seeing me as I am and thinking that's enough. Not enough, he corrected, pressing a kiss to her hair. Perfect, exactly perfect. And in that moment, with the world finally beginning to see what he'd known all along, Isabel believed him. The wedding morning arrived with a gentle rain that cleared just as the sun rose, leaving everything fresh and gleaming. Isabel stood before the mirror in their bedroom, brushing her hair with steady hands. She'd chosen to wear her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit her taller frame, cream-colored silk that had yellowed slightly with age, but still held its elegance. You don't have to change anything, Daniel said from the doorway, watching her. We're already married in every way that matters. I know. She turned to face him, seeing her future in his steady gray-green eyes. But I want this too. I want to stand before witnesses and say the words, not for them, but for us. He crossed to her, taking her hands. Then that's what we'll do. The ceremony was held at the ranch, in the meadow where the spring flowers were just beginning to bloom. It was a small gathering. The Sullivans, Reverend Morrison, Margaret Clay, brave enough to attend despite the gossip about her brother, and, surprisingly, the banker Thomas Morrison and his wife. Even the blacksmith Samuel Carter had come with his family. Not exactly a society wedding, Mary Sullivan said, helping Isabel with the final touches. But I think it's perfect. It's ours, Isabel replied. That makes it perfect. Daniel waited by the makeshift altar, wearing his best shirt and a new vest Mary had insisted on gifting them. His face lit up when he saw Isabel walking toward him. No father to give her away, needing no one's permission but her own. Dearly beloved. Reverend Morrison began, his voice carrying across the meadow. We are gathered here today to witness something that has already taken root and flourished the love between Daniel and Isabel. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional but spoken with deep meaning. When Daniel promised to honor and cherish her, his voice was rock steady. When Isabel vowed to love and support him, her words rang clear and true. Do you have the rings? The Reverend asked. Daniel produced 2 simple gold bands. They were my parents', he explained quietly. Been waiting for the right person to wear them. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Isabel felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness or overwhelming emotion, but from the simple rightness of the moment. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Morrison declared. You may kiss your bride. Daniel cupped her face gently, mindful of their audience. Hello, wife, he murmured. Hello, husband, she replied, and met his kiss with joy. The small gathering erupted in applause. Even Margaret Clay smiled, the expression transforming her usually pinched features. As they turned to face their witnesses, Isabel felt the significance of the moment, not the paper or the ceremony, but the public acknowledgement of what they'd built together. The wedding feast was simple but hearty, spread on tables under the spring sky. Mary Sullivan had brought a cake, Thomas Morrison contributed wine, and the blacksmith's wife had made her famous cornbread. It was a patchwork celebration, much like Isabel's salvaged dress from the social, but somehow more meaningful for its improvised nature. To the McCraes. Doctor. Sullivan raised his glass. May your union be as strong as your individual spirits. Here, here, the others chorused, and Isabel felt warmth spread through her chest. The McCraes. She was Isabel McCrae now, officially and legally. As the afternoon wore on, the guests gradually departed, each offering congratulations and promises to visit. Margaret Clay lingered, clearly wanting to speak privately. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly, for not speaking up sooner about Edwin. You could have been hurt worse. You spoke when you could, Isabel replied. That took courage. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You showed me it was possible. To be strong, to speak truth even when it's hard. She glanced at Daniel, then back at Isabel. I'm leaving Wild Hollow. My aunt in San Francisco has offered me a position as a governess. I think I need to find out who I am away from my brother's shadow. Good for you, Daniel said warmly. Sometimes distance is what we need to see clearly. After Margaret left, promising to write, Isabel and Daniel found themselves alone in their meadow, the last rays of sunset painting the mountains gold. No regrets, he asked, pulling her close. Not one, she assured him. You? Only that I didn't marry you sooner. They stood together, watching the day fade. Officially wed, but feeling no different than they had that morning. The bond between them had been forged through harder trials than any ceremony could provide. That night, in their marriage bed that wasn't new but somehow felt sanctified by the day's events, they came together with a tenderness that spoke of permanence, of promises kept and futures secured. I love you, Mrs. McCrae, Daniel whispered against her skin. And I love you, Mr. McCrae, she replied, reveling in the simple pleasure of saying the words freely, openly, without shame or hesitation. They moved together in the darkness. Two people who had found their match in unexpected ways, whose love had been tested by fire literally and emerged stronger. When release came, it was with quiet gasps and murmured endearments, a seal on vows already lived before they were spoken. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, their home, their life together, now blessed by law as well as love. Things will be different now, Isabel said. Being married properly, people will have to acknowledge us differently. Some will, Daniel agreed. Others will find new reasons to disapprove, but that's their burden, not ours. No, she agreed. Not ours. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The sound that might have once seemed lonely now felt like communication, connection across the darkness, much like what they'd found in each other. What are you thinking? Daniel asked, feeling her smile against his shoulder. About Edwin, actually, wondering if he ever really saw me at all, or just what he wanted me to be. His loss? Yes, she agreed, but also his tragedy. To go through life unable to see people as they truly are, to need them smaller to feel secure. What a narrow existence. You feel sorry for him. I feel grateful that his rejection led me here, that his inability to see me meant you could. She raised up on one elbow to look at him. Do you believe in fate? I believe in choices, he said carefully. You chose to answer his advertisement. I chose to offer you shelter. We chose each other, step by step, day by day. If that's fate, then yes. A practical romantic, she teased. A romantic realist, he corrected, pulling her back down. I realistically adore you. She laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. And I practically worship you. See, perfect match. They settled back into comfortable silence, bodies still humming with satisfaction, hearts full of quiet contentment. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges running the ranch, dealing with the ongoing ripples of Edwin's arrest, building their place in a community that was slowly accepting them. But tonight, they were simply Daniel and Isabel McCrae, husband and wife, partners in every sense. "You know what I'm looking forward to most?" Isabel asked sleepily. "What's that?" "Waking up tomorrow and the day after and all the days after that, knowing I'm exactly where I belong. No pretense, no trying to fit into someone else's idea of what I should be, just being with me." "With you." She pressed a kiss to his chest, over his heart. "Always with you." "Good," he said simply, "because I plan on keeping you." "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "You're stuck with me now. Daniel McCrae, legal and everything." "Best trap I ever walked into," he murmured, already half asleep. Isabel smiled in the darkness, thinking about traps and choices, about the winding path that had led her here. She'd come west seeking a traditional marriage and conventional happiness. Instead, she'd found something far more precious, a love that saw her truly, valued her completely, and gave her space to be exactly who she was. The moon rose full and bright, streaming through their window to silver the quilt Daniel's mother had made, now covering her son and the woman who'd become his wife, not in the eyes of society first, but in the truth of their hearts. Tomorrow, the world would know them as the McCraes, but tonight, they were simply two people who'd found home in each other, and that was more than enough. As sleep finally claimed her, Isabel's last thought was a prayer of gratitude, not for the ceremony or the ring on her finger, but for the man beside her who'd seen her height as strength, her calloused hands as capability, her fierce independence as something to cherish rather than tame. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Daniel, to God, or to the universe that had conspired to bring them together. A warm arm tightened around her in response, and she knew that whatever she was thanking, the answer was the same. "You're welcome. You're home." The blizzard struck without warning on a clear March morning. Isabel had noticed the peculiar stillness in the air, the way the horses clustered together nervously. But the storm came faster than expected. Within an hour, the world outside had transformed into a howling wall of white. Daniel had ridden out at dawn to check the fence line in the north pasture. What should have been a 2-hour task had stretched into 4, and now the storm made visibility impossible beyond a few feet. "He knows these lands," Isabel told herself, pacing before the windows. "He's weathered storms before." But as the 5th hour passed, her calm certainty gave way to growing dread. The wind screamed like a living thing, driving snow horizontal. The temperature had plummeted so fast that ice formed on the inside of the windows. She made her decision, bundling into Daniel's spare coat over her own, wrapping scarves around her face until only her eyes showed. She headed for the barn. The wind nearly knocked her down the moment she stepped outside. She couldn't see the barn, though it was only 50 feet away, using the rope Daniel had strung between buildings for just such emergencies. She fought her way to the horses. Sage whinnied in recognition, pressing her warm nose into Isabel's gloved hand. "I need your help, girl," Isabel said, quickly saddling the mare. "We need to find him." It was madness to go out in such weather. She knew that, but the thought of Daniel lost, injured, freezing somewhere in that white hell was worse than any risk to herself. She tied a rope around her waist, securing the other end to the barn door. It would give her at least a chance of finding her way back. Then she mounted Sage and plunged into the storm. The world vanished. There was only white and wind and the brave mare beneath her, head low, pushing forward. Isabel trusted the horse's instincts more than her own, letting Sage pick the path while she squinted through the driving snow. Time lost meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. Her face grew numb despite the scarves. Her hands, even in thick gloves, began to lose feeling. Still, they pressed on, Isabel calling Daniel's name, though the wind tore the words away. Then Sage stopped, ears pricked forward. Through the swirling white, Isabel saw a dark shape. Her heart leaped, then sank. It was Daniel's horse, standing with head low, reins dragging. "Daniel!" She dismounted, nearly falling as her numb legs hit the ground. The rope around her waist pulled taut. She was at its limit. She found him 20 feet from his horse, half buried in a drift. He'd fallen, his leg twisted at an angle that made her stomach clench. His face was pale as the snow around him, his lips tinged blue. "Daniel, Daniel, wake up!" She shook him, relief flooding through her when he groaned. "Isabel." His voice was weak, confused. "What are you? You shouldn't be." "Hush. We need to get you home." She assessed quickly. His right leg was certainly broken, and he was already hypothermic. She couldn't lift him onto Sage alone, not with his injury. But she'd come too far to fail now. Using strength born of desperation, she managed to drag him to a small cluster of rocks that provided minimal shelter from the wind. She pulled off her outer coat, wrapping it around him despite his weak protests. "I'm going to get help," she told him. "Sage will stay with you." "No." His hand caught hers with surprising strength. "Too dangerous. Stay." "I can follow the rope back. I'll bring blankets. Make a travois. I won't lose you, Daniel. Not to a storm. Not to anything." She kissed his cold lips, then remounted his horse, leaving Sage as warmth and comfort for him. The journey back was nightmarish, following the rope hand over hand when the horse faltered. By the time she reached the barn, she could barely feel her extremities. But there was no time to warm herself. She gathered blankets, rope, and 2 strong poles. She harnessed their gentlest draft horse to a makeshift sled, then back into the storm, following her own tracks before they filled, praying she could find him again. Sage's whinny guided her the last few yards. Daniel was still conscious, though barely, working with numb, clumsy hands. She fashioned a travois, padding it thick with blankets. "This is going to hurt," she warned, then moved him as gently as possible onto the makeshift stretcher. His cry of pain nearly broke her, but she kept working, securing him carefully. The journey home was the longest of her life. She walked beside the draft horse, one hand on the guide rope, the other steadying the travois. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering her name, apologizing for things that made no sense. "Don't you dare apologize," she told him fiercely. "And don't you dare leave me. You hear me, Daniel McCrae, you promised to keep me. Well, I'm keeping you too." When the barn loomed out of the white, she nearly cried with relief. She managed to drag the travois inside, out of the wind. The relative warmth felt like heaven. "I need to get help," she told Daniel, who was conscious again, his face tight with pain. "Your leg needs setting." "Can't, not in this storm." He was right. Town was 5 miles away. No one could make it. "Then I'll do it myself." She'd helped her father set a ranch hand's broken bone once. She could do this. "Isabel." No arguments. She made him as comfortable as possible on a bed of hay, then set about gathering what she needed. Straight boards for splints, torn strips of fabric for binding, the whiskey Daniel kept for medicinal purposes. "Drink," she ordered, holding the bottle to his lips. "As much as you can." While he drank, she examined the leg properly. A clean break. Thank God. Below the knee. She'd seen worse. "This is going to hurt worse than moving you," she warned. "I trust you," he said simply. And those 3 words gave her the courage she needed. She waited until the whiskey had dulled his eyes, then acted quickly. Grip, pull, align. His scream echoed through the barn. Then he mercifully passed out. She worked fast, splinting the leg properly, binding it tight. Only when it was done did she allow herself to shake. She'd done it. He was safe. They were both alive. She managed to get him into the house as the storm began to ease, settling him in their bed with hot water bottles and every blanket they owned. His color was better, his breathing steadier. The leg would heal. He would heal. She built up the fire until the room was almost uncomfortably warm. Then finally allowed herself to strip off her wet clothes and crawl in beside him, sharing her body heat. "You saved my life," he said hours later, when consciousness returned properly. "You rode out into that storm and saved my life." "You'd have done the same for me." "That's not the point." His hand found hers under the blankets. "You could have died. Isabel, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking that I couldn't lose you." She turned to face him carefully, mindful of his leg. "I was thinking that you're my husband, my partner, my everything, and I'll ride into 100 storms before I let anything take you from me." He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm supposed to protect you." "We protect each other. That's what marriage is." She touched his face gently. "Or did you think I meant it lightly when I vowed in sickness and in health? You carried me, literally carried me home. And you've carried me in other ways since the day we met." She smiled slightly. "It's just my turn to be the strong one." Over the next days, as the storm passed and the world emerged white and new, their roles reversed completely. Isabel tended the horses, mended fences, hauled water and wood. She also tended Daniel, changing his bandages, making sure he ate, keeping him from trying to do too much too soon. "I should be helping," he grumbled on the third day, watching her prepare to clear snow from the barn roof. "You should be healing," she corrected. "Dr. Sullivan said 6 weeks minimum before you can put weight on it. 6 weeks of you doing everything alone." "I'm not alone. I have you here, keeping me company, advising me." She kissed his forehead. "Besides, I'm tougher than I look." "That's what worries me," he muttered, but there was pride in his eyes as he watched her work. The story of her rescue spread through Wild Hollow like wildfire. Men who'd scorned her for being too masculine now tipped their hats with newfound respect. Women who'd whispered about her impropriety now spoke admiringly of her courage. "You're a hero," Mary Sullivan said during one of her visits to check on Daniel. "Riding out in that storm, setting his leg yourself. People are calling you the bravest woman in the territory." "I'm not brave," Isabel protested. "I was terrified the whole time." "That's what makes it brave," Mary insisted. "Doing what needs done despite the fear." Daniel recovered slowly but surely. By the time the spring flowers bloomed, he was walking with a cane, the bones knitting strong and straight thanks to Isabel's skillful setting. He would always have a slight limp, especially in cold weather, but he was whole and healthy. "I owe you my life," he said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains. "You owe me nothing," she replied. "We're married. What's mine is yours, including my strength when you need it." "And what's mine is yours," he agreed, "including my deep and abiding gratitude for the woman who rode into hell to bring me home." "I'd do it again," she said simply, "every time." "I know." He took her hand, scarred from work and weathered from the rescue, but beautiful to him. "That's just one of the 1,000 reasons I love you." They sat together as darkness fell. Two people who'd been tested by nature and human cruelty alike, who'd emerged stronger for the trials. The slight unevenness in Daniel's gait would always remind them of that terrible storm. But more than that, it would remind them of what they could survive together. "No regrets?" Daniel asked, echoing his question from their wedding night. "Not one," Isabel assured him, meaning it even more now than she had then. "Not a single one." Spring arrived in full glory, painting the Montana landscape with wildflowers and fresh grass. Daniel's leg had healed well, leaving only the slight limp that acted up on cold mornings. As they worked together in the mild sunshine, preparing for the busiest season on a horse ranch, Isabel noticed the new sign he had been crafting in secret. "McCrae and Randall Horse Farm," she read aloud, running her fingers over the carved letters. "But I'm McCrae now, too." You were Randall when you started building this place with me, Daniel said, lifting the sign to check its balance. Your name deserves to be here. Besides, folks already know us as McCrae and that woman who tamed wild horses and saved her fool husband from a blizzard. She laughed. That's a bit long for a sign. Hence the shortened version. He held it against the gatepost. What do you think? I think it's perfect. Together they mounted the sign, working in the easy rhythm of partners who'd learned each other's movements through season after season. When it was secure, they stepped back to admire their work. Official now, Daniel said. Equal partners in name and deed. We need papers drawn up, Isabel said practically. Legal ones, making sure we both own this place clear and proper. He looked at her in surprise. You thinking of leaving me? Never. But I'm thinking of protecting what we've built. Both of us. She touched his arm. You nearly died last winter. If you had, what would have happened to me, to the ranch? I hadn't thought. Because you're a man. The law protects you automatic. But I'm your wife, and wives have precious few rights without proper documentation. She met his eyes. I won't be left vulnerable again, depending on the charity of others. We do this right. Then we'll see Thomas Morrison at the bank tomorrow. Daniel agreed. Draw up whatever papers you need to feel secure. Not just me. You too. If something happens to me, nothing's happening to you. Daniel. Her voice was patient but firm. We can't promise that. We can only prepare. He pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. I hate thinking about it. Then let's handle it quick and proper, and never think of it again. The next morning found them in Thomas Morrison's office, signing documents that made them full legal partners in the ranch. The banker, who'd become a friend since standing witness at their wedding, handled everything with professional efficiency. Smart thinking, he said as they signed. Too many folks leave these things to chance and hope. You're building something to last. As they left the bank, Isabel noticed a new dress shop had opened where the old millinery used to be. In the window was a ready-made dress that caught her eye, deep blue wool, practical but elegant. Go on, Daniel urged, seeing her look. We can afford it now. The army contract for horses will see us comfortable through next winter. I can make my own dresses. You can do many things. Doesn't mean you have to do them all. He steered her toward the shop. Let someone else do the sewing for once. The shop owner, a young widow named Mrs. Porter, who'd recently arrived from Chicago, greeted them warmly. If she'd heard the old gossip about them, she gave no sign. How wonderful to meet you, Mrs. McCrae. I've heard so much about your work with horses. My late husband bred racing stock in Illinois. As Isabel tried on the dress, she marveled at how much had changed. A year ago, she'd been the town pariah, whispered about and shunned. Now she was trying on dresses while discussing bloodlines with a respectable widow. It suits you perfectly, Mrs. Porter said when Isabel emerged from behind the screen. Though I could take up the hem if you prefer. No, Daniel said from his chair by the window. It's perfect as is. Isabel met his eyes in the mirror, seeing the same appreciation there that had been present since their first days together. He'd never wanted her smaller or different. The dress, which showed her height rather than trying to disguise it, was just another reflection of that acceptance. They made several purchases, including fabric for work clothes and a new shirt for Daniel. As they loaded the packages, Isabel noticed Edwin Clay's sister, Margaret, approaching. She looked different, confident, well-dressed, with color in her cheeks. Isabel, Daniel, she greeted them with genuine warmth. How wonderful to see you. Margaret, Isabel embraced her. You look well. How's San Francisco? Marvelous. I'm only back for a brief visit to settle some family business. Her expression sobered slightly. Edwin's been sentenced to 2 years. I thought you should know. We'd heard, Daniel said quietly. Are you managing? Better than managing? I'm thriving. Margaret's chin lifted. Turns out I'm quite good at teaching. The children adore me, and I adore them. I'm even walking out with a gentleman, a fellow teacher who appreciates intelligence in a woman. I'm so glad, Isabel said sincerely. I owe it to you both. Seeing you stand up for yourselves, refuse to be diminished, it gave me courage I didn't know I had. Margaret squeezed Isabel's hands. You showed me there was another way to live. After she left, they drove home in thoughtful silence. The ranch came into view, their sign prominent at the gate, and Isabel felt the deep satisfaction of belonging. Regrets? Daniel asked, their old question. None, she answered, as she always did. You? Only one. She looked at him in surprise. What? That we don't have more years behind us, that I can't go back and meet you sooner, love you longer. Daniel McCrae, you romantic fool. You're a romantic fool, he corrected, helping her down from the wagon. Forever and always. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a rider approached. It was young Tom Baker, the boy who'd first shown her kindness that day Edwin rejected her. So, Mrs. McCrae, Mr. McCrae. He pulled up, breathless with excitement. Ma sent me to tell you, there's a new family moving in, the Thurstons, and they've got 3 daughters. Ma says they're looking for someone to teach them riding, and she recommended you. Me? Isabel blinked in surprise. Yes'm, said you were the best horsewoman in the territory and patient besides. They're coming by tomorrow to meet you, if that's acceptable. After Tom rode off with their agreement, Isabel sat in stunned silence. Teaching. She'd be teaching young ladies, sharing her skills openly instead of defending them. Things really have changed, she murmured. You changed them, Daniel said. By being yourself, unapologetically, by showing them strength and grace can exist in the same person. We changed them, she corrected, by building something worth respecting. The next years would bring more changes. The riding school would flourish, with young women coming from 3 counties away to learn from the tall horsewoman who rode like she was born in the saddle. The ranch would prosper, their reputation for quality horses spreading far beyond Montana. Children would come too. In time, 2 daughters as tall and strong as their mother, raised to be themselves without apology. But that evening, sitting on their porch with their whole future spread before them like the vast Montana sky, they were simply Daniel and Isabel McCrae, partners, equals, 2 people who'd chosen each other not despite who they were, but because of it. What are you thinking? Daniel asked, noting her distant expression. About Edwin, actually, wondering if he's learned anything in prison. Does it matter? No, she decided. What matters is what we learned. That love isn't about making someone fit your expectations. It's about seeing them clearly and thinking, yes, this, exactly this. Exactly this, Daniel agreed, taking her hand. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the barn, Sage whickered softly to her foal. The night sounds of the ranch settled around them like a familiar blanket. You know what the best part is? Isabel said suddenly. What's that? Tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days to come. Just living our life, working our land, being ourselves without apology or explanation. Together, Daniel added. Always together, she agreed. They sat until full darkness fell. 2 people who'd found their place in the world not by conforming to it, but by having the courage to create their own. The sign at their gate caught the Moonlight McCrae and Randall Horse Farm. 2 names joined in enterprise as in life, neither diminished by the other, both strengthened by the union. It wasn't the life Isabel had imagined when she'd answered that mail-order bride advertisement. It was something far better, a life built on truth, sustained by respect, and deepened by love that saw clearly and chose deliberately. As they finally rose to go inside, Daniel paused. Thank you, he said simply.
For what? For seeing me that first night? For staying? For becoming my partner in every sense?
He touched the sign they'd mounted that morning. For making this more than just a ranch. For making it home.
Thank you, she replied. For giving me the space to be myself.
For seeing strength where others saw flaw. For choosing me, not despite who I am, but because of it.
Best choice I ever made,
he said, holding the door for her.
Mine too, she agreed, stepping into the warmth of their home.
The door closed behind them, shutting out the night and sealing in the life they'd built together. On the gate, their sign stood proud in the moonlight,
a declaration to the world. This is who we are. This is what we've built. This is where we belong.
And in Wild Hollow, Montana, where judgment had once run harsh and choices were limited, the McCrae and Randall Horse Farm stood as proof that sometimes the best life is the one you build yourself, with someone who sees you true and loves you whole. No regrets, not one. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, courage, and finding where you belong. I hope Isabel and Daniel's journey touched your heart as it did mine. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this story meant to you. If you enjoyed this tale from the Wild West, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of the American frontier. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing these historical romances to life. Until next time, partners.